My name's Paul Bestall. This is Mysteries and Monsters on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Welcome to Mysteries and Monsters. This week, we're delighted to welcome podcaster, investigator, and now published author, Shannon LeGro. Shannon has been presenting her brilliant show, Into The Fray, since November 2015, and has quickly asserted herself as one of the leading lights in paranormal podcasting. Shannon has also been a massive supporter of Mysteries and Monsters, and a real influence on both myself and the show. We'll cover Into The Fray, her new book, the brilliant Beyond The Fray, Bigfoot, a collection of witness accounts and telephone calls made to the show, and the upcoming Small Town Monsters series, On the Trail of UFOs, which Shannon is heavily involved in. Thank you once again for the support for the show. January saw us top 10,000 downloads, which is just incredible, so thank you very much. So if you don't mind, if you can continue to leave us a nice review on whatever podcast app you're using, we'd be most appreciative. Thanks to Gary, John, Adjia, Stefan, Michael and Lisa for their recent positive comments. Thank you guys, means a lot. As usual, you can find us on Facebook. We're on Insta and Twitter as Mystery Monsters, as well as on Patreon. You can also subscribe to our channel on YouTube, but bear with us as we've had a few issues with our podcast host, so the show's running a little bit behind on YouTube. Once I work out how to sort it, they'll all be on there. So bear with us. Sorry. Okay. Are you ready to go beyond the fray with Shannon LeGro? My guest today is easily the biggest influence on me as both a podcaster and an interviewer. With a podcast that goes where many do not, Shannon LeGro has consistently pushed the boundaries with her wonderful show, Into the Fray. As 2020 starts, Shannon has hit the ground running with her first book, Beyond the Fray, which is out now, and the new Small Town Monsters series, On the Trail of UFOs, which is coming out shortly. Shannon, finally delighted to welcome you to Mysteries and Monsters.
Finally, I get to talk to the one and only Paul. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, thank you very much today. The pleasure's all mine. I mean, it's very interesting because I noticed something the other day, and somebody mentioned that Into the Fray started November 2015, and don't take this the wrong way, but it seems like I've been listening to that show a lot longer than 4 years.
No, I appreciate that. That's a wonderful compliment. Thank you. It's flown by. It really has.
Yeah, I mean, I was just having a flick through this week at some of those first episodes. Obviously, Nick Redfern on the very first one, and some of the people, and the amount of people that were on the early episodes that I've now ended up connecting with or speaking to myself. It just blows my mind, and it was such a really cathartic show listening to you because, as we've mentioned before, it was quite a tough time for me at that period, and your show was one of those highlights of the week that always put me in a good mood and took me somewhere I wanted to be.
Thank you so much for that. That means everything to me, and I've said it time and again, but I would be nowhere if people were not willing to come on and let me ask just inane badgering questions to these incredible stories that they have and life-changing, as you know all too well.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it's really interesting because I was speaking to my brother about this the other day, and we've always thought that your show is kind of like a paranormal therapy for a lot of your guests, especially some of the eyewitnesses, because a lot of these people, as you refer to in the book, have never shared these experiences with family or friends or co-workers, primarily because they're scared of the ridicule and the stigma that comes with expressing that you've seen creatures that are not supposed to exist. Do you find that allows you to build that rapport? Because I think one of your strengths is that you've got a wonderful way with people when they come on the show, that they're able to open up and be totally honest with you.
Yeah, and I think not only because I've had my own sighting, which then subsequently, as a teenager, the sighting was, I didn't talk about it for 30 years. And then, of course, when I started to do these shows and things started to come out that, oh, well, I mean, it's a natural question. What got you into this? Well, it was my own sighting when I was a teenager. And then that just plays in naturally when you're talking to people because, and something I love more than anything is hopping on with somebody cold. And by that, I mean, they have an experience. I might know if it's a haunting or Bigfoot or whatever. I might know that much, but I don't know any of the details. And I love that more than anything because then I feel like the questions come from a more natural and inquisitive place. That's my favorite thing.
I mean, it is always exciting as well, I think, because the other aspect of your show is it's opened my eyes to so many people. Obviously, a wonderful mutual friend of ours is Brennan Storr, because obviously Brennan appeared on your show, and I've always found that podcasting is a bit like audible crack.
It is
in the way that certain shows, because obviously over here in the UK we have yet another show we both appreciate, Howard Hughes's The Unexplained.
Yes.
And I heard Micah Hanks on his show, so then I started following the Gralien Report, and then obviously that's how I came across you, because you appeared there just as you were launching Into the Fray. And then from there, obviously, Into the Fray, there's people like Derek with Monsters Among Us, and obviously Sam and Ryan. It's just the way it spreads. I mean, the only downside to it is I don't have enough money to buy all the books I want.
Yeah, I think that is one of the biggest problems. And then if you have the money to buy all the books you want, you need an actual library room, like one of those really nice ones where the walls are covered in that deep dark oak or whatever the wood they might use in a library is. I don't know, mahogany.
Yeah.
So you got to have a place for them. So, in fact, you mentioned Nick Redfern. I saw a post of his on Facebook. This was a couple of months back, not that long ago. He's so funny because the post was it was a picture of his house, and then with several bookshelves that are full, and that's much like what my office is, even though I can't use my office anymore because it's we've got birds down there, and anyway, yeah, that's why I'm recording in the closet, everyone.
The famous closet.
Yeah, the famous closet. Very warm in here, no vent, but worth it for audio purposes. But he said he gets annoyed when people ask him for pictures of his quote unquote library. And he's like, I don't have an actual library, folks, but I've got a good collection of books. And I think that that's how most of us feel. I mean, sure, we wish we could have that ultra sexy library, its own room and comfy big old green couches. But the addiction of, like you said, the crack that is so funny of doing the podcast and talking to people and gathering the information and gathering the stories, and then vice versa with just however much time you can have to read something.
I mean, in regards to the book coming out, did you feel it was kind of a natural progression? Because it's very interesting, because obviously the show is very well known in paranormal circles, and like I said to you in the introduction, it's one of the 4 or 5 shows I listen to week in, week out, and always have done. Is this something that you'd been thinking about for a couple of years, or was it something that you kind of sort of approached towards the end of last year? Because I know that's when you said you were super busy and something was coming, and then obviously the book came out.
Well, it's funny, and that's a good question, because I had actually started to write kind of an introduction, which would naturally be my sighting. And it wasn't hard to write because it was really already up on my website as a blog post, and I had spoken about it. So it wasn't some, big secret or anything. But, then I thought, well, sure. I mean, the content is there. And many people have heard me say on my show, I'm not a writer. I'm not a big fan of writing. I'm not a big motivated person to sit down and take my thoughts and organize it in that way. And a lot of people probably say I don't organize them well when I speak either, but there you go.
Me and you both.
Yeah, right, like high five. I mean, I'm still shocked people listen. But it took Jeff emailing me and really just kind of giving me that push. And I saw immediately that he was the right person to team up with. And he is such an incredible motivator for me to, we each have our part in this. And it just makes it so much easier, at least for me, because I'm not, like I said, I'm just not, if I wrote a book by myself, and if I had taken that idea to fruition, it would probably be another 5 years. Into the Fray's been around that long, and it would take another 5 years just to get one book done, if not more. I just didn't have it. It wasn't at the top of my list, but having Jeff as a partner, G.Michael Hopf is his pen name for anybody that wants to go look him up, Hopf. It took him doing that, and it's been such a wonderful partnership. And we've got a second book coming out, and then of course we started Beyond The Fray publishing. So I'm very excited to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, well, if anything else, it's given me impetus to finish mine off, because I've been doing it for 3 years, and I think I've got to about chapter 3, and I'm like, right, okay, enough's enough now.
It's tough. It's really tough. I mean, some people like Nick Redfern, or Max Hawthorne.
Yeah.
The Prince of Paleofiction, our buddy, he sits down and he writes a certain amount of words a day. I'm like, my brain just doesn't work like that, and it might be a difference between fiction and nonfiction too, but I've asked Jeff that same question, and I'm like, do you know where it's going when you sit down to write this stuff? Because he's usually based in fictional works, which Beyond the Fray Bigfoot is not. And it's an amazing process of how true writers, how their minds work. I'm like, I don't live in that space. I just don't.
Yeah, I was talking to Richard Astep, who is also incredibly prolific. Certainly not. Yes. Nick Redfern's output is frightening.
He's writing in his sleep, I think. Yeah. There's got to be no other way. We have to see if he sparkles in the sun. Like, is he a vampire? Does he sleep? Just like Sam Sheeran. I'm like, you don't sleep, do you? You sparkle. You're busted.
Yeah, absolutely. The work ethic is staggering, and especially with Nick, because it's not like he sticks to one part of the paranormal or Fortean. He's covering all kinds of different phenomena. So it's the research and the knowledge and the work. It's a staggering amount, even if you just look at what he's put out over the last 2 years.
Oh, it's unbelievable. Yeah, I don't think the guy sleeps. There's no way. I don't believe it. If he says he does, no, Nick, you're lying. You got to be.
Absolutely. One of our finer exports to the USA.
That's right.
Yeah, I think, is he living in Texas, I believe, isn't he, Nick, these days?
Yes, yeah, still in Texas. There's a lot of the guys there. We've got Lyle Blackburn, Ken Gerhard, Nick Redfern's there. You've got Craig Woolheater. Texas, and then Cam and Kyle of Expanded Perspectives. Yes. So Texas has some heavy hitters in the paranormal encrypted world out there.
Yeah, it's one of those states. It's like Wisconsin. It seems to be a magnet for the best of the best.
That's right.
Really.
That's right.
Then once again, it must be something in the water, I suspect.
Yeah. In your neck of the woods, you produce incredible musicians, and in certain places of the U.S., it's. I guess we have some real weirdos out here. Is what you're saying.
Come to England, you'll meet many a weirdo, Shannon. I can introduce you to many.
I love in Howard Hughes' area, you mentioned him, how he says the time slips, right, in his particular area are something. I find that fascinating. I love that.
Yeah, Liverpool is a very historic town, because obviously it's been a port for years, centuries. So it's a very strange mixture of the old and the new, and obviously it's got a really big immigrant population, especially from Ireland. So there's a lot of mystery and legend and folklore in that city. So it's the kind of place where if you're going to expect a time slip, Liverpool's one of the places you would probably think, yeah, it's going to happen there.
I love stories of time slips.
Yeah, very much so. In regards to the books and was it difficult to work out which stories to cover, because the majority of them are from episodes of the show. So Was that the hardest part, sort of filtering them down, Shannon, to which ones you wanted to include in the first volume?
In some cases it was. Others, it's hard, just like children, you don't want to say you have your favorites, but you kind of do. I mean, obviously some of them stood out and I knew that I wanted to include them. And of course it's a whole process of making sure that you have permission and all of that even though they've already been on the show, that's a whole nother side to things. So we did it the right way. And a few of them will be saved for hopefully a next, Bigfoot, do part two, Beyond the Fray. And, but yeah, there was some that I was like, oh gosh, I really want to put this in there, but we might have to wait till the next round.
Yeah, I mean, well, at least it's. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, one of the other aspects of the book that I really enjoy is it reminds me of David Weatherly's wonderful Woodknock series, because it's a collection of stories from around the country with very different experiences in very different states. Some that you would not consider hotspots for large cryptids. Places such as Idaho, for example. So I really like and it's one of the aspects of the show is that, you've got people from all over North America calling in to talk about experiences, which gives a greater depth to the Bigfoot phenomenon, rather than, for most people on the outside, they would simply assume it's Washington State, British Columbia, and sporadic areas in, Oregon and places like that. Obviously, the show and the book clearly show that this is a continent-wide phenomenon.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a big misnomer when it comes to the big guy is, it's Oregon, Washington. Some people are getting privy to the fact that it's Florida. But when you have, Oklahoma, I mean, that's where Area X is. If you're familiar with this subject, people will be well ingrained with Area X.
Yeah.
You've got Wisconsin. Those poor things in Florida, though, I always say it. I'm like, if I was a Bigfoot, I would not be down in Florida. No, thank you. A little too warm, covered in hair, doesn't go. It's not right.
Yeah.
But, people that, they'll hike, maybe the Appalachian Trail or something. I mean, I would love to just walk that trail just to put the message boxes, like a comment box on that trail. Say, have you seen a Bigfoot? I mean, I'm sure some of the comments inside the box wouldn't be very nice, to be honest with you. They would go, "You're a kook." That would probably be the nicest thing they'd call you. But maybe every once in a while you could really get something amazing. Or just, a recorder box or something. I don't know. It's a crazy idea. It's silly. But can you imagine? I'm people that walk that Appalachian Trail and maybe don't see someone for, a few days or a week or whatever. There's stories from all over. That is the wonderful thing about Bigfoot.
I mean, that's the other aspect is every time I see certain documentaries, I'm always taken back by the scope of the geography, because when we living here in our little island of the UK, I think a lot of people just don't really grasp just how large certain states are and the forests inside these states, and it blows people's minds. I think that these areas, a lot of people outside of those even in the US, outside of particular states, perhaps people don't realise the geography in there.
Oh, and there's plenty of places to hide. And I've said it many times, but I do like to say it because I think it drives home the point. But Bigfoot to me is like the Liam Neeson of the woods. They're just bad to the bone. They're born and bred to live in that environment, and they're 100 times better than you in the woods. I don't care how long you've been out there hunting or hiking. And there's some bad to the bone people. I mean, Derek Randall's from Chapter 3, Cries of a Baby. That man goes out hiking for miles and miles and miles, even to this day, by himself. And he's smart about it. He goes armed and he's prepared with supplies and all of that. But I mean, Bigfoot's just better than us in every way, shape, and form when it comes to being in the bush.
Yeah, I mean, it is impressive. I mean, Derek's a prime example of that, because he's a mountain of a man.
Yeah, he handles himself incredibly in the woods. And when we were out in Washington with those guys, with the entire Olympic project, he was like, oh, I'm going to go out scouting for a few hours, and we're like, well, the other guys already knew, but I was like, oh, a few hours. And I'm like, no, oh yeah, just a little walk. I was like, good Lord, man, handling business. Go, Derek.
Absolutely. I mean, the other aspect, of course, is, North America. It's regardless of, let's not worry about the cryptids right now, though you probably will do after you've read the book.
Yeah, maybe a little more, huh?
Yeah, big time. Is that the natural predators out there are as more dangerous because obviously, you've got a really big bear population, you've got mountain lions, you've got things that will kill you regardless of being out there. So you've got to be super safe and super on it to even just go for a wander anywhere, especially in the northwest of the states.
Yeah, and to be honest, I mean, having a Bigfoot sighting is like lightning striking anyway. Whether or not they're around and they're watching you, you'll never know it, obviously. But yeah, I mean, the cougars, the bears. I mean, having a mount. I was living in Washington State for a few years back when I graduated high school with my dad, and unbeknownst to us, the neighbor across the street would go out fishing. And would throw out fish heads and, the small sharks. They'd throw the heads outside. And I don't know why you wouldn't just turn it into mulch or something. But we eventually got a massive mountain lion coming around. And it had to be dealt with as far as telling the neighbor basically stop feeding the big kitties. It's not so safe around here. It was a massive one, too. Never saw it, but the size of the tracks was impressive. And you have to have a lot of respect for things like that.
Absolutely, big time. I mean, it just astounds me, when I listen to people like Les Stroud and the things he does, and obviously on the recent Expedition Bigfoot show with Russell Acorn, who's another, these people that will just go somewhere a week's walk from anywhere, and you just think, good Lord.
Yeah. I miss those days. I miss the woods so much. I love the desert. I would prefer the heat, but I miss having the option to go into the woods and even just maybe something happening. Like I've said it before. I'm like, unless the Yucca Man from Joshua Tree National Park tends to wander over this way, which, as you know, in one of my stories is a possibility. I'm unlikely to see the big guy out here in Nevada for the most part.
Stranger things have happened.
That's right.
So, let me firstly then touch on one of the wonderful stories that's in the book. And rereading the story again just really sent it home. The whole experience that this person has is essentially someone decides to go for a nighttime jog in their area and seems to attract the attention of a pacemaker, shall we say?
Yeah, this one definitely on the no list. Like I was joking in the beginning, the no list is something that I've said lots of times on my show. It could be something going on in someone's own home or a cryptid experience, but this is definitely on the no list. And this actually comes from a judge out of Ohio, and his name is obviously kept anonymous for obvious reasons. So this is back in 1985, and he was about 15, and he's training for a marathon. And, he's going out to run in the evening because it's warm during the day. And again, Ohio, and if you've ever been in Ohio in the summertime, it certainly does kick up in the humid range there. So he's running at night. It's late, I think around 10 or 11. And he does say there's enough moonlight to see, but it's not a full moon. And he's running on a temple road. And it was so cool because he's very forthcoming with exactly where this is, because he wanted people to go. As I Google it, I mean, you can see exactly what's doing out there. And on one side, he's got the cornfield and then the soybean field on the other. And then he says, and Ohio is very much like this in part of the state, is there's small patches of trees, here and there. And that's the way that much of the state is set up. And then there's farmland sparsed in between. So he's about halfway done, and he's coming in on a crossroad area. And he admits that at a wooded area, he starts to kind of just get a weird feeling. His spidey senses are tingling, if you will. And he stops and he does hear movement from the cornfield, but he doesn't see anything. So he's like, all right, whatever, probably just a deer. But now he hears it more, and he can tell it's something quite large. And he's like, all right, still probably a deer. No big deal. He starts to run again, and then he realizes that this thing is pacing him, and it's running pretty darn close to the exact same pace that he's running at, and still doesn't see it. But he can see in the corn it moving, and it's, of course, just a few stalks back, so he can't see anything. So he's kind of going, well, that's kind of weird. Deer don't really do that. So he goes, all right, let me stop. And then it stopped. Now he's going, oh, gosh, I don't really think that this is a deer. And he says, I yelled out. Yeah, so now he's like, oh, God, because he's out here by himself. It's 10 o'clock at night. Very rural area, so that's what it's important to keep in mind. He hollers out. He's like, maybe I can scare it away. It'll take off. Nothing. He's like, all right. Starts to run again. He stops again, and it stops again. So, it's a recurring theme. He's testing it, and it has no problem just answering right back like, yep, I'm following you. No problem. So he gets another, I think, half a mile or quarter of a mile until he hits Route 4 as the crossroad. And he knows he's still got a few hundred yards before he hits his house. So he goes, all right, this is kind of freaking me out now. So I'm going to run as fast as I can and, try to get to Route 4. Well, he does that. And unfortunately, this thing takes off with him and, again, is pacing him exactly at the same pace that he's going. And this part is terrible, and it gets only worse from here. But his plan was to get to this abandoned farmhouse that he knows has this massive tree in the front yard. He could, climb up and wait for morning, and that's a terrifying, prospect. But that's like what he's coming up with, right? And he sees as he gets upon it that it's been what's called dehorned. So they've shaved all of those lower limbs off, so there is no way to climb it. So now he's like, great, I'm really kind of screwed here. And now he's going, okay, I can go left to get to my house to run further, or I can go right and go to my friend's house, which is like 100 to 150 yards down the road. He votes for that one. So he stops running, but he continues to walk quickly. And he's still matching pace with this thing in the corn, whatever the heck this thing is. And, of course, at this whole time, he's terrified that it actually will come out, even though he says, I am really wondering, of course, what this is, right? So Route 4 is now right there. And he goes, okay, time to run. And here's where, unfortunately for the poor judge, he does see it. So he runs, he takes the right. And now this thing actually does finally emerge from the corn. And he says that the first thing that came to mind was the Egyptian god Anubis. So quite lanky, very long face. Anybody can Google Anubis and you can see what we're talking about there. Obviously, it's on two legs. That's kind of a problem for him. And he said it was hard to judge its height because its head, at this point now that it seemed to have stood up all the way, was taller than the corn, which, what a bummer. That would be like diaper time for me. I don't know about you guys, but
yeah, I'm
so
with you there.
Oh my gosh. And now I'm like, nope, on the no list. Thank you. He says, it's got a really well-defined canine head, very dark hair. And as I said, very lean. Like a greyhound dog, but muscular. You hear that a lot with the Dogman encounters. They're lean, but they're still just cut. They're ripped. And he said it was standing like a linebacker, just kind of like ready for a snap during a football game. So very forward. And forward, by what I mean by that is, if you are familiar with a lot of the Dogman encounters, they're pissy. And they don't care if you see them. And they always seem angry. and they're very, I mean, cocky is the word, right? That's I guess a very American word. I don't know if you guys use it over there, but cocky, they're full of themselves. They're like, hey, yeah, here I am. Are you gonna go and cry in the corner? And then you go, yeah, I am actually. So now he sees this thing full bore. He's like, I'm out, and he runs as fast as he possibly can. Here's where when he told me this, I knew some of this before I hopped on with him to record. I didn't know this part. And after he told me, I was just stunned. So he makes a run for his friend's house. There's a chain link fence, obviously not a super tall one, but he rockets over it. He gets a little caught. Like, this is all like playing like a movie, horrifying movie reel in your head. Yeah. He's not looking back at this point because he knows he doesn't have the time to spare. So he gets over the fence. And then, guess what he does? He jumps in his friend's pool, and he exits all the air out of his lungs so that he can sink to the bottom. And what he's doing is sitting at the bottom of the pool and looking up and hoping, but probably expecting, this massively dark shape to come looming over the side of the pool and look at him underneath the water. And he's like, great, you're marinating for me. Perfect. And, thankfully, it doesn't happen. But, he needs air at some point. He's not a dang fish. So he comes up out of the water, sees from what he can tell that there's nothing around there, bolts to the back of his friend's house, and I think that it wasn't even locked, and just walked in, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And the friend was there by himself. Yeah. And scared the crap out of that kid, poor guy.
Because he's watching the Playboy. He's watching the Playboy channel, so I think he's probably enjoying himself and didn't expect an intruder.
That is the last thing on his mind, and that's the last time I'm sure he left that damn back door unlocked. I'll tell you. He's like, "What a friend you are! Yeah. Thanks a lot, buddy." He's got the house to himself, so he's doing what a 15-year-old does. Yeah. So he gets inside, and he's like, he spits out the story. He's freaking out, and his friend believes him enough to where he freaked his friend out, the one that was having his special alone time. And they locked all the doors, and they checked the windows and all of that, and they waited till morning, which I think was a very smart move. And he does go home, and he tells his father, of course, who dismissed it. Yeah. But the cool thing was, even though his father dismissed it outright, he said that his dad never, ever went outside at night without a massive firearm on him. So, in a way, you're kind of going, okay, well, that must have felt good, because maybe he didn't totally just knock your story 100%. So he actually does still live in that area. And I remember asking him, do you go down Temple Road quite a bit? He's like, yeah, I've been around there lots of times. And I was like, do you ever go running at night anymore? He's like, oh, no, I do not. But, that's one of those stories. And, I do have a hard time with Dogman over, but it's a tough one for me. Something like that being out there is just so much more fantastic than a Bigfoot. But when I take these stories from these people, and I can hear in their voice that they're reliving this, much like I do when I tell my shadow person story, I believe them. I do. I believe them. And something that's come up, it doesn't come up a lot, but every once in a while you'll get someone that goes, well, how did you vet that? How do you know that I didn't? It's not my job. Yeah. It's your job to make up your mind what you think of the encounter. That's not my job. It is nearly 100% impossible to put a stamp of approval on most anything that we talk about. I mean, take a step back. What do you mean? How did I vet this? So that's what I like to say is, I collect the stories, I provide a forum, and it's up to people to make up their own minds whether or not they believe the person that I'm speaking to.
Yeah, I think it is interesting. I mean, the one thing that I spotted in this particular story is that there is this certain sensation that occurs to people, primarily with Bigfoot, but I've noticed it in several very interesting dogman encounters where they get this sense of, like you refer to, spidey sense tingling, the fear factor kicks in without them actually being aware of why they should feel like this. And when I grew up as a child, we had a couple of fairly big farms that were near us that we used to play around, as you do when you're a child. So in the summer, when the corn was there, you could quite easily hide in a field and be 5 yards away from someone. They wouldn't know you were there till you jumped out at them and made them scream.
Right, yeah. Which is amazing to do.
Oh, yeah, very good. It's one of my favourite childhood pastimes. Terrifying. But,
hey, we could still do that. There's nothing wrong with it.
Well, true. As long as
they might put us in the loony bin, but like, oh, Paul's out in the cornfield again. Yeah, Paul's at it again.
Yeah, keep him off the Jack Daniels.
Yeah, exactly. Cheers to that. If that's your drink, that's what I drink too. So there you go. There's something to that. More, I think all of Jack Daniels needs to sponsor us. Yes. You know, we need sponsors.
Yes, I will always be willing and able to be a tester for the Jack Daniels Brewery at any point now into the future, I think.
Yeah, sponsored with some kind of a firearm and some whiskey. Nothing goes better than booze and guns, right?
Well, not over here, no.
Oh, that's true. Never mind.
Maybe an air rifle or a really powerful Nerf gun.
Yeah, and there you go. With some of those horrible suction cups on it. Very terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like I say, Linda Godfrey's obviously the prime example of Kaleti the Dogman, and there's certain aspects of the story of the judge's story that there are those things, like you say, the fear factor and the realization of seeing something that can't possibly exist, but there it is.
Yeah, and most all of the Dogman encounters I've ever heard are on a no list. They're just always in a pissy mood. Yeah. They do not care if you see them for the most part. Even DDoS came on my show, and one of the experiences that he had, and granted, he went out looking for one of these things and unfortunately got it. And that's another theme throughout the book, of course. Be careful what you wish for. But he was in his truck actually with the window down, and one of them, I forget the exact details, but it comes out and he can see it. And of course, it's terrifying. I'm not trying to diminish it, but I'm just kind of glancing over it. But one of the things that he said was it started to basically unfurl itself and stand up, and he could hear the tendons popping and creaking and the bones pop, and the details like that. You're going, man, that is, that's one of the things you're kind of going, if someone was going to make something up, I mean, it's not impossible, but holy cow, I mean, that was a heck of a story. And the Dogmen are always, they're on their own wavelength, that's for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember the first real Dogman story I came across, which was I think he was a forestry worker, or he worked for the Department of Fisheries or something out there, and he's the guy that put was it a deer carcass in the back of his truck? And he was about to set off, and it just turned up and grabbed it. Now, and they were going, oh, well, maybe you're mistaken. Mistaken for what?
Exactly. Exactly. Like that. I mean, but you know what? The other night, Sean Forker said something interesting, and I don't discount anybody's opinion. I take them all, to heart and try to mull them over. Something that he said was, I think that almost all of the Dogman encounters are misidentified Bigfoot, and that very well could be. Until I see something like what the judge saw, I can't discount that either. But if you were talking to the judge, I bet he would disagree and say, oh, that was no Bigfoot. I wish it was a Bigfoot. That's kind of the common theme is they love to freak people out. And as you said, a lot of times somehow that comes across even before the creature itself is even witnessed.
Yeah, it was very interesting because I had the pleasure of speaking to Tony Healy from Australia, who's written a wonderful book about Yowies, which I can't recommend him enough, and I'm delighted to hear he's doing an updated version, because I think that's about 10 years old. And obviously the Yowies have exploded in Australia in regards to that. And he was saying that they've noticed over the last 5 years or so that there are more reports of the Yowie being spotted with a muzzle. Which it kind of balances it up a bit, and he's kind of the opinion, well, is it people hearing Dogman stories from America and transferring them to Australia, or are they misidentifying Yowies because they've no idea what the hell they're looking at?
Right.
So that's...
Paul, have you heard of anything coming out of Australia after those horrible fires going on? I mean...
There's been a few rumours. I mean, obviously, thanks to the show and stuff, I'm really good mates with several well-known Yowie hunters down there now. And none of them... I've seen a few dubious YouTube channels claim it, shall we say.
Yeah.
But all the main investigators and researchers down there haven't kind of put anything. Though I know the ABC phenomenon, because obviously they've got the mystery black cats down there, the same as we have over here in the UK. They seem to notice a bit more activity in regards to that rather than things occurring with Yowies.
Gotcha. Yeah, I just, like the fire on Mount St. Helens.
Mm.
When after the volcano blows and you've got fire and the Bigfoot being brought out supposedly by the forest workers there. So, I mean, that's, again, no way to vet any of these stories, but it's a very popular one.
Yeah, well, the Mount St. Helens story has been around for quite a long time. I remember the first time I think I came across that story was probably in the early 90s when I finally embraced my love of weirdness.
Mm-hmm.
And I read a report, I can't remember where I read it, and I read the first report about the Mount St. Helens Bigfoot incident, and I just thought, well, why not? Because it was just, I mean, the thing about Mount St. Helens that's always surprised me is how few people died.
Right.
Because that thing went off like nobody's business. And I mean, it's a terrifying, it's 40 years ago this year, I think, isn't it? Yeah, 1980.
Yeah, and I was up there, it was probably 3-4 years ago. It was quite a while ago, but it's astonishing. It's trying to come back, but you can still, the scars are very, very visible even to this day. So astonishing what it did to that area.
Yeah, absolutely. It was the only thing missing, because it was what they normally call as a perfect volcanic eruption. Not that they are, because they're like horrendous. Yeah. But obviously it had the Lahore, which is the thing that just smashed the whole area, like the giant rivers of mud just covering boulders and trees and all sorts. It was just like the apocalypse afterwards. I saw some of the aerial footage when they were obviously trying to find some. Incredible. It's jaw-dropping. But so I wouldn't be surprised, and it'd be I wouldn't be surprised if we hear later in the year that this Yowie story come out. Now, whether there's any truth in it, like I say, everybody I know in the field, and I don't know everybody, I don't pretend to, there's nothing as far as I'm aware. So we'll see. Who knows?
Yeah, you never know. And like you said, the various YouTube videos, some of them can be very nefarious. So at the end of the day, it's always up to the listener until we get a body. And everybody's, that's another whole can of worms as far as whether we need one or not. But yeah, poor animals out there in Australia.
Oh, it's shocking. It's heartbreaking to see, to be fair. And it's already it's a wonderful hodgepodge of marsupials, because there's some wonderful creatures in there, though I know most people are going, oh my god, it's terrifying, when you've got things like cassowaries that'll gut you with one kick if you get too close.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I just the spiders alone though, I'm like, I don't know if I'd want to visit Australia, because me and the spiders, so people always love to plop stuff in the Facebook group and tag me in it. Hey Shannon, look at this, and it's just it's like a massive like a huntsman spider dragging off the biggest rat you've ever seen, and you're like, I think I'm okay on that. Maybe the dog man's not so bad. I don't know.
Yeah, well, like that one I shared with you yesterday.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, Dwayne the Rock. I was like, oh my gosh, it's so fitting.
Absolutely. Brilliant. And
big black spiders.
Been found by someone who handed it in, because obviously they milk them.
Oh, see what? No. It's so wrong, right?
Yeah. If you've never watched, obviously you've never seen it, but watching a spider get milked for its venom is quite a very strange thing.
And then you got the girl that it's a GIF or GIF, however people want to pronounce it, but the girl that has the freaking spider in her mouth, and then she just smiles like normal, and then opens her mouth, and the spider just plows out and just climbs up her face. I'm like, girl, you're wrong. You are so wrong. No.
I'm just pleased the spider knew which way to go.
No kidding. Yeah, if she keeps it in there too long, I mean, she won't be hungry for at least a week. Gosh,
that
thing was meaty.
Yeah, you don't want those tarantula hairs down your throat. I tell you what, you'll have more than a tickle. You'll have more than a tickle then.
Yeah, you may as well swallow a cactus.
Yeah, big time, because that tarantulas, that's their favourite weapon is the hair.
Yeah.
Have some of
that. And just the shock of seeing them. Besides that, that's all I'd need. I was like, you don't even need to touch me with your hairs. I'm either frozen in fear or burning the house down or running out screaming or maybe all three.
Yeah, especially as tarantulas are the only spider that vocalise.
Yeah, it's not right either.
Yeah, because they hiss like snakes.
No, but see, to me, I hear them going, they're calling your name somehow. You're like, okay, I'll leave you right in your last case.
I'm not too bad with spiders, obviously, because in the UK, we might get a nasty bite off a fake black widow. That's the worst one we've got over here, because we're very lucky that, the angriest animal in the UK you might meet is a grumpy badger.
Well, what do you mean fake black widows? You guys don't have actual black widows there?
No, they're like a cousin, so they're like a Mediterranean version. So you're more likely, you might get anaphylactic shock rather than die. So it gives you a really bad one. However, there were a couple of black widows that were discovered under a pavement in Manchester about 6 years ago that were quite happily living there.
Oh, like the legit ones.
Yeah. So, they've kind of appeared over the last 100 years. They started on the south coast and they're working their way up. I found one about 6 years ago. We'd been on holiday, came back, there was one sat in the bath, fake black widow.
So the fake ones do not have the red hourglass then?
No. So they've got they're kind of like a cherry body. I'll send you the picture. And I checked it, and it was definitely one of them. So I had to be very careful because I must have got some kitchen roll and I returned it to the outside, but that was a bit touch and go because I thought if it goes for me, I don't fancy having a bite.
Yeah, he's like, thanks for saving me. Boom, you just get hit. I mean, so how does a real black widow? I mean, is that very much like an arachnophobia situation where it comes over on something else? I mean, how does that? That's very strange.
Yeah, they think they've kind of hopped arrived from the Mediterranean. Because they're quite common in Italy and stuff. Because we once went playing golf in Italy a few years ago, and then when we started the round, the guy said, "Oh, if you see like cobwebs on the floor or what you think's like a dandelion, which is like a flimsy white flower just on the floor, don't touch it." And we're like, "Okay," and why is that? And he says, "Oh, it's a spider nest, and if you touch it, it'll just jump out and bite your finger."
Oh, that's messed up. See, they're so aggressive. They're like the dog man of the arachnid world.
And we went on this one particular part of the course, and it was just the whole ground was covered in them.
Oh, no. You had to skip that hole or what?
You just hit it and hope for the best.
You're like banging the ground as you're walking up to your ball. That's amazing. Stomping your feet. That's terrible.
It was all straight. It was a very strange course because around the corner there was a lake with a alien population of capybaras living there that had escaped from a fur farm.
Oh, I would love to have a capybara as a pet. That would be amazing.
Yeah, crazy.
If you have to wear snake boots out there just to go golfing, huh? I mean, it's angry spiders trying to attack you, drag you down into your hole, into their hole, and you're like, I'm too big, but you could try.
Yeah, it's like 35 degrees. Cowboy boots are not the apparel you want to be walking around.
Very
in.
True. Very true.
Unless you want very sweaty feet.
The golf club would not probably appreciate that very much. They're like, we don't need to punch the greens right now, so you need to change those things.
Absolutely, and they don't go with my pink ensemble.
You get like the Bill Murray pants, like the super loud ones with all the colorful print,
Yeah, and I'm not that bad, but I tend to prefer interesting outfits on the golf course.
You do the tight socks up to the pantaloons? Is that what they call those?
Yeah. +4s, it's called.
Yeah.
Most
that's
golf clubs,
great.
They banned them a few years ago. Apparently people were taking the Michael, and so golf clubs actually, strangely, don't appreciate people turning up like that. I went on a stag do the other year, and the groom was going. And he wore +4s, and we had to check every golf course he was allowed to come on.
Oh my gosh! See, now I would think that they would prefer that because a lot of times you'll see people showing up in jeans, which of course is not proper golf attire. So I would think that they would like the more dressy, kind of classic I mean, really classic look
Yeah.
for a golfer. But that's
The
that's
Payne
new to
Stewart,
me.
Payne Stewart.
See,
look.
I learn something new every day.
Yeah, well, we're a weird country.
No, you're a lovely country. It's my home country, of course.
Of course, indeed. So, I mean, one of the other stories I adore in the book is the boundaries crossed one.
Yeah, this one, when David came on with me, I think that for me, it was, even to this day, still one of my favorites. And I don't say that it was my favorite. No, it was heart-wrenching for him to tell it and for me to hear it and for people still talk about it to this day. Yeah. And that was one of my very first episodes. So David was a person that admitted he was kind of into, spooky stuff and some cryptid stuff ever since he was younger. And he got in touch with a very prominent researcher whose name I did not divulge. Mm-hmm. And they became friends. They're talking about Bigfoot research. They would go out for hours upon hours upon hours doing said research. And they were in a particular state. Again, I won't divulge it, but they're in a state here in the United States. So it wasn't in any weird spot, or we're not overseas anywhere. It's not the Yowie story. Mm-hmm. And this mentor of his says, and they're using topo maps, topographic maps. They were always into reading those and keeping track of where they were and making notes. And he takes the map and he says to David, he circles an area and says, never ever go in this area out here. And David's like, why? He's like, well, because I think that they live there, like really live there. Because every time I've been out here, I've had experiences with juveniles, so young Bigfoots. Mm. And he's like, all right, I won't. But of course, he's like, that really, planted the seed in me, and I wanted to go out there very badly. So I think it's very next week, and he lives 6 hours from this location. He tells his wife that he's going on a business trip, which at this point in time wasn't very strange for him. So not only did he lie to his wife, but he also didn't tell anybody where he was going, what he was doing, nothing. So he's breaking all the rules right out of the gate. So he packs up a little bit of stuff, really enough only for a day hike, goes out to this location, parks his truck, walks out to pretty much where he figures he's right inside the circle, and sets up shop. And he's not out camping or anything. He just sits his back against a tree, and he's got, I think, a ravine behind him, and figures here's a good spot. And he's sitting there for several hours, to where he's kind of getting bored. He's probably had a couple snacks or something, just hanging out. And he's like, well, it's getting late enough, it's getting dark enough to where maybe I'll just snooze for a few hours and get up with the daylight and head home before anybody misses me. And he does doze off at some point, but then is woken up by the sounds of what he described to me as a woman screaming as if she's being murdered, but then amplify that just several times over. So extremely powerful screams, and it's coming from more than one direction. And the screaming has gone on so long that he has, at one point, does in fact go to stand up, but then the screams had gotten closer, and then to where he can feel the concussions and the vibrations in his body, and he crouches back down, and he puts his hands on his ears, and he's screaming, I will go if you just let me, I'll leave. And at this point, you can tell he's getting bogged down telling. It's very difficult for him, and it was hard for him to tell it, and it was hard to hear. But here's another no list. He realizes he's either going to stay here and goodness knows what's going to happen to him, or he can try to leave. Well, he doesn't stand up again. He starts to crawl out on his hands and knees. And he says, at this point, I am weeping, I am sobbing, because I didn't know if I was going to make it out of there. And that's pretty graphic. You're getting screamed at. Now, at this point, and he never does see anything. That's maybe the creepier thing. He doesn't see anything. It's not always a sighting that is a scary thing. but he knows it's some very massive things right around him. And he's crawling out on his hands and knees, and he's realizing now the gravity of the situation. No one knows where he is. And the funny thing is, he goes, I'm going to get killed by the very thing that my friends used to make fun of me for being into, and they're not even going to know it. But I'm going to have this confirmation. I'll be dead out here and no one's going to know. And then, of course, he thinks of his kids. Yeah. They're going to think I left them. They're going to think I abandoned them. And he's like, well, I'm going to try. So he finally gets out to the trail, stands up, and is trying really hard not to run. And he doesn't until the very last part where he gets to his truck. And he admits that the entire time he was walking, he was being paralleled. And that sounds very familiar, doesn't it, from that other story I just talked about? Mm. There are similarities if we're talking about two different types of creatures in their tactical movement. So he was being followed out the entire way. The screams were still going on. And then when he can see his truck, I think it was like somewhere around 100 yards. He runs full bore to his truck. And he jams out of the parking lot, and he said he got to his hotel room, and shut the blinds, and just bawled the whole night. He was terrified. He had to go home, explain to his wife why he was covered in scratches, after going on this quote unquote business trip. But yeah, not so good to explain to the old honey. And he didn't go in the woods for 20 plus years. I mean, not even during the day. Yeah. So this was one of the ultimate examples of be careful what you wish for, because it could be life changing. And to where something that you used to love doing now has become a PTSD situation, basically. Yeah. And he admitted to me that it was somewhere between 20 and 25 years, if I'm remembering correctly, until he could go back in the woods. And it was only during the day and only with a group of people. And I think even to this day, he never did admit to that mentor that he had done what he had done. So yeah, Boundaries Crossed is definitely one of my favorites, and I'm still in contact with David, and it's a life changer. It's definitely on the no list.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those episodes that stayed with me since the first time I heard it, primarily because he's either the greatest actor that I've ever heard, or he had an extremely disturbing emotional event happen to him in the middle of the woods that changed his life for the worse.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just terrifying, because the bit where he's just surrounded by the screaming, and it's coming from different points, knowing that then suggests that there's more than one of them there, whatever they are.
Right. And something I forgot to mention about his location, and I have been out to that area, not specifically maybe to the circle. I would love to meet up with him one day. We've talked about that before, and go in. He was willing to, maybe at some point. So I would love to do that with him. But he said that, the other thing that had kept him from getting up and bolting, running and screaming in the dark, is the fact that there was, rocky crags and crevices and, quite hefty falls. Oh, another thing I forgot. People were probably like, well, why didn't he turn a flashlight on? Didn't he have a flashlight? Yes, he did. And he admitted to sometimes thinking, well, maybe I could turn the flashlight on. It could aid me somehow. But number one, maybe they'll see me more. And number two, do I really want to see what is producing these screams all around me? So that was another very important part of the story that I left out, was the fact that, yeah, he had a flashlight, but he chose not to turn that thing on.
Well, I think it's always very interesting, because there are numerous accounts, not only in your book, but across a variety of TV shows and interviews, where people have had encounters like like we said, be careful what you wish for, where they have an emotive response that goes against everything that especially the guys that go out hunting every weekend, deer hunting or hog hunting. These guys, it rocks them to their very foundation.
Yeah, and it is so sad, because you mentioned the hunters, which is a prominent theme throughout the book for obvious reasons. They go out by themselves. They go out a lot. They're sitting there in total utter silence if they're a good hunter. And And then it's something they used to love to do, and a lot of them don't do it anymore. They refuse to do it anymore. So if that's when it's hard to rectify the fact that, if that's what's going on, as far as they don't go out anymore, then how do you quantify that with them making something up?
Yeah, absolutely. Because and this is the other thing, when they always say the misidentification situation. Well, are we suggesting that these are the world's crappiest hunters then? Because
right.
if they can't identify anything in the woods and everything's Bigfoot, which most people don't, they have one experience and that's it, they've done. These guys are experienced people that are out there from, like there's a couple of stories where people are in there, 12, 13 years old going out deer hunting. These are people who grow up in these areas, that know these areas, that know the fauna that's supposed to be there.
Oh yeah, they're well schooled. Even some of these guys, like you said, even if they're 12 and 13, some of them have been hunting since they were maybe even younger. I mean, that was just part of their childhood, and they were taught to, know what you're looking at before you fire, know what you're firing on. And for some of these guys, they're going, well, I don't know what I'm looking at, so what do I do?
Yeah, exactly. It's the fight or flight, and I think for a lot of them, they don't want to take that risk.
No, and you'll see, you've heard stories, and it's also in the book. I hate to keep saying that, but it is, where at first they are frozen in fear. And then it might take a few, and it wasn't just the hunters that this happened to, but it takes a few moments. It probably felt like an eternity, but it took a few moments for the flight portion to kick in, right? So that was also another theme throughout.
I mean, I've seen a couple of witnesses who basically, even when they talk about it, it still makes them cry.
Yeah.
And then, no, I'm not going to call anybody out who's telling. You and I have both heard numerous stories from a variety of parts of the weird world, Shannon, that we both scoff at.
We're like, no thanks.
Or people who claim to be part of a Martian fighting force and things like that.
Oh, you mean the really far out stuff? That yeah. This is something I tend to bring up just because it does give me a chuckle. Is it some people, and it might just be one guy that thinks this, I don't know, but the fact that Bigfoot was put here by the aliens to mine precious metals for them so that they can run their alien ships. So there you go. That's why they're here. Now you know. The more you know.
Absolutely. Well, yeah. I mean, I've heard the alien pet theory before, but the alien miner one was a
new poor things. They need to form a serious union and get that taken care of, man. At least get fair wages.
Yeah. Well,
paid.
Yeah, big time. Absolutely. Or maybe they're paying them in dogs.
Yeah.
Stranger things have happened. Or maybe they're paying them in people, and that explains 411.
Well, yeah, and they can keep some for themselves, obviously, for the pig on the spit, for lack of a better term. Very graphic, I know. Like it's like Vlad the Impaler over here, but they can keep some for themselves, and then the others mostly they just turn them over to the aliens. So see, the aliens are really quite lazy from the sounds of it. It's all the Bigfoot doing all the heavy lifting.
Yeah, big time. And I think that's a wonderful segue into your next project. You see how I did that?
That was. I am usually horrible with my segues. Big high five on that. Boom. Mic drop, Paul.
Thank you.
So the next book, we're working on it right this moment, is called Beyond the Fray, Paramalgamation. And that is a word that I came up with, not specifically for the book really, but for an episode that I pride myself on the names and the images and everything. I didn't know what the hell, to be honest, to name this episode, because it was just all over the place. I'm like, it's an amalgamation. It's a paramalgamation. Oh, lovely. So that's what the book's going to be. There are a lot of stories in there that haven't been on the show. There'll be even more in this book than Beyond the Fray Bigfoot, that has several. But we've got Wendigo. We've got things that shadow people have done that I've never quite heard before. It's just an amalgamation of all kinds of paranormal goodness and very difficult to classify experiences, which are some of my all-time favorites that I've ever heard. So that is actually up for pre-order now on Amazon. That is Beyond the Fray, Paramalgamation. And that is, it's scheduled to come out end of April, but we're actually pushing to get that out sooner.
Yeah. Well, I was really impressed because obviously when the book came out, I thought, oh, well, I might have the delay coming. But it was literally on my doorstep 2 days after I got it. So
That's awesome.
I'm always delighted when books that I want to buy from American authors come out and I can get them immediately. So
That's
fabulous.
Awesome to hear.
So yeah, and speaking of aliens, we will next see you fronting the marvellous first Small Town Monsters collection of the year.
Yeah, on the Trail of UFOs, I was lucky enough to be the on-camera host for. We traveled. It's got to be. We didn't clock it, and we were kicking ourselves now, but I don't know, 4,000 miles or something crazy, all over the country, East Coast, West Coast, Midwest. I mean, all over to speak to if I could speak, experiencers and researchers, the like, and it really just takes a look into. The big theme of it was, why aren't people just looking up anymore? It's all these people just trying to be famous, and it's name dropping and all of this, but we've lost just the wonder of looking up into the skies and, where do they come from? Why are they here? It's asking all of those questions to the people that we spoke to. So, and actually the Kickstarter is live for that, and it's not just for On the Trail of UFOs, but it's also for the Mark of the Bell Witch and the Mothman Legacy, of course, part 2 for them, for their Mothman project. So, Kickstarter backers get all kinds of extra goodies. And I've heard Seth say this, but it's not like you back and you just get your name in the credits. You get that plus whatever you put in, you get back. So all kinds of actual physical extra goodies. So they can go to Kickstarter.com and just search Small Town Monsters, and that will pop right up. So that's live right now, and that way you can, if you're interested in backing a cool project, that's a great way to do it. Actually, 3 projects for 2020.
I mean, I was delighted when I heard Seth was going to focus on this, because I think in the realms of cryptozoology and ufology over the last sort of 2 or 3 years, things have kind of gone away from the more extreme shows we had at the beginning of the last decade, where people were just running around woods screaming a lot.
Yeah.
To a more balanced, pragmatic approach to the subject, and I'm hoping one day Seth and the Small Town Monsters team turn their cameras onto the paranormal, because I think it really needs saving from itself.
It's gotten pretty bad, I think, and everybody has kind of jumped on the bandwagon of, well, I need to front a show, I need to be on a TV series, but I think that maybe they get quite disillusioned probably pretty quickly when they find out post-edit it's not what they thought it was going to be. And I'm not calling anybody out specifically, of course. I just think in general that might be, if people were able to be honest, that might be what is said.
Yeah. I mean, ghost hunting is one of the most boring aspects of the Fortean world you could ever wish to indulge yourself in.
Absolutely. I mean, no, that's spot on. And honestly, so is Bigfooting. Besides the fact that you're in the woods, and that's great, especially if you like being outdoors. But we're talking 99% of the time, there is not going to be much going on. I mean, unless you are in a really big hotspot or something, that the chances probably go up from there. But for the most part, you're just sitting in a dark room and talking into a recorder like a fool, and you're not going to get anything. But hey, we're trying. What can you say? We're not knocking anybody. It's just the truth.
Yeah, very true. I mean, my experience of it is usually 8 hours of boredom with occasional moments of excitement.
But then it's only your friend behind you because he tripped over something. You're like,
walked into a wall.
Damn you! You got me excited for nothing. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, many years ago, I remember as a child, we were once terrified. My cousins had come round. And we'd moved out of the haunted house. It was the house afterwards, which we only had 1 or 2 incidents when we first moved in. And they came over and we got the lights off. It was like November time, so it was pretty dark, pretty early on. And he went to go to the toilet and he opened the door to go on the stairs. And there was a silhouette at the top of the stairs. He was terrified, screaming, and everybody's like... And I'm the oldest one. I'm about 11 at this point, so I'm, the man of the moment. So we all peep round and we can all see this silhouette, and we're terrified that there's something at the top of the stairs. And it took us about 15 minutes, and I just went, right, I'm going to turn the light on. And I turned the light on, and it was a duffel coat that had fallen.
Oh.
And it was just peeping round the banister at the top, so it looked like a head. Still
See,
makes
but you
me
know
laugh.
the unfortunate thing is, for those that it really terrified, it doesn't even matter that's what it was. Like you're gonna look over there every time now in the dark and wonder, well, maybe it really was something, and then it just turned into I mean, that it's all perception. So that's a great story, though. I just saw something on Facebook that was it looks like Batman standing in a foggy
Yes,
field.
and it's a
Did you
horse.
see it?
It's a
Yeah,
horse.
it was just a horse with the blanket over it. And someone's like, that's a sad Batman. I laughed out loud because it looks hunched over. It looks like Batman's hunched over, all like, oh, dejected. That's amazing.
Or
It's funny what our brains do.
Yeah, Batman the beer years.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got a six-pack, all right, but it's not the kind he used to have.
Yeah, sponsored by Miller Lite.
That's right.
Well,
we're all
listen,
trying.
Absolutely. So listen, where can everybody get hold of everything? Because I know you've got a pressing schedule, and as much as I'd like to keep you for longer, I know you've got stuff to do.
Oh, we'll do this again, Paul. I promise you that. Yeah, so intothefrayradio.com is the home for the podcast. Of course, it's on all podcatchers and even iHeartRadio, Spotify, and YouTube. I always upload to YouTube. And then, of course, Amazon for Beyond the Fray Bigfoot and Paramalgamation. And, if you're interested in publishing a book with us, it has to live under that umbrella that Into the Fray lives. But Beyond the Fray Publishing, if you want more information on that, that's .com on that. So, Paul, I appreciate you so much. What a wonderful conversation. And please say hello to Christy for me.
I certainly will. She's been very pleased. She sent me a message just asking me how I hope it's going okay.
Well, I would say it went amazing.
Yeah,
and,
well, thank you for taking the time. It's been a long time coming, but I'm delighted to finally get you here. And like I say, I will. The invitation that you offered me, I will always be available. So whenever you want me to pop on ITF, just let me know.
That would be amazing. Maybe Christy's got some stories she wants to share. We could do a tandem interview.
Yeah, well, strangely enough, we were talking when we first met the other week, and we both had elderly visitors sitting on our beds when we were 3 and 4.
That's interesting.
Yeah, she had a woman, I had a man.
No kidding.
And
okay, see? There we go. You're both coming on. How about that? That would be so fun.
Well, she's loving the world of the weird and knowing that I'm immersed in it probably more than she is.
That's amazing. Like father, like daughter. It's wonderful, and congratulations to you guys.
No, thank you. I'm chuffed to bits. So I'll put everything. As usual, I'll do my show notes because I know you're a big show notes fan. And I'll put all the links and everything into it. But listen, thank you so much for your time today. Congratulations on the book. It's fantastic.
Thank you so much.
And all power to you. And I can't wait to get hold of In the Trail of UFOs. I'm really looking forward to seeing what goes on. And especially, it was like ticking off a list of my favourite people in there. Like David Weatherly's in there. Mike Hanks, Ryan's there. You go and visit Dr. Lynn Keatai, who I'm very lucky enough to have spoken to a few months ago. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that. And especially, as Ryan mentioned when you were chatting to him, the wonderful eye that Seth has for the vistas. It's just beautiful. I love watching. It's one of the highlights of small town monster films is the geography that he shows us. It's wonderful. Love it.
Yeah, being up in and around Franconia, getting those fall colors, it was stunning. And watching him fly that drone, we're all going, this is going to be epic, epic shots. And yeah, I got to meet so many of my, best buds that I've never got to meet on that trip. So that was incredible. But wonderful conversation, Paul. Lovely. You're a wonderful interviewer, so I cannot thank you enough for having me on.
Hey, well, it's all down to you. Thanks for giving me the kick up the backside to do it.
Absolutely. And you and your lovely daughter are welcome on. I think we should try to plan that.
Absolutely. Well, I'll message her after this and we'll see where we go. All right.
Awesome.
Listen, you take care. Lovely to speak to you. And no doubt I shall see you online soon.
You better believe it. Have a good day, Paul.
You too.
Bye-bye.